are thrilled and proud to have you all here in front of us today. We're going to go ahead and introduce folks into our last day of our lives. This is Daniel Myers.
Hi.
She's an author of YA, science fiction YA.
Yes, indeed.
And this is April Jo Murphy. She's also an author, but of...
academic stuff.
Yes, the thing. And this is Tina Shelton, also another author. Who'd you call?
Oh, I'm YA for this one.
There you go.
Not forever.
And then this is Cedros Philbert, who, if any of you are familiar with the White Wolf games, he was part of a great deal of Warren Bartlett's, great deal of those, including Mage the Ascension and Werewolf.
Changeling. Actually, everything, but I did a little bit of work on Vampire, but not a lot. There she is.
Hey, there she is. Hello.
Sorry,
Hey, Krista.
Fabulously late. Fabulously late.
Sorry.
So good. I don't think I'm going to throw rocks.
Okay.
Rocks. Okay.
They do have big weapons.
That's true. It's true. You'd be surprised if you do it. Okay, so we're going to get started.
Okay.
So everyone, Chris O'Connor, who is a rather prolific horror author and dark science fiction author. So I guess I'm going to kick this off and say that I know that the titles, the subtitle is the past, present, and future of gender equality, speculative fiction. I think we're going to go ahead and just skip to the future. And that is, I don't think we need, the future is now, the future is, these moments we have and everything else. We don't want to dwell on the past and here. There are far more intelligent, far more learned men and women who are talking about that every day. So let's start with where to go from here. And I'm going to start by asking everyone, from Danielle on over, and ask each one of you to say what you think is the biggest obstacle to gender equality in fiction today, and will be in the near future, at least.
I don't know if I have time to come up with like the ultimate biggest obstacle, but one of the ones that I've been noticing a lot lately, so I guess it's the biggest on my mind at the moment, is just the fact that there's not enough representation of characters that are female in the speculative fiction genre, so there's not enough, like the ratio is so low that there's not enough chances for there to be strong female characters because you only get 2 out of 10 characters being female to begin with, and maybe one of them will be an interesting, well-developed, but 2 out of 10 is not a very good starting point. So I guess the ratio needs to be fixed, I think.
It's the frequency.
I think probably what I foresee being the biggest obstacle to gender equality in any situation is still holding on to this idea of essential gender as a biological construct as opposed to a social construct. Because as long as we keep reducing characters into male or female and not necessarily looking at them as people, I think we're just going to end up perpetuating a cycle. I think it has a lot to do with the current culture. I noticed, especially lately, that feminism has become like this new catchword, like it wasn't new in the 60s. And it's actually getting a lot of pushback because people are tired of reading it. It's not even necessarily that people don't believe in it. It's just that some people, especially men, are feeling cornered. Like, what did I do? And I think that as long as it's so aggressively acknowledged, then it's just going to be that fight on the playground. Well, you can't do that because you're a girl, And so it's just become culturally ubiquitous. And so I think the biggest challenge is changing that piece of culture so that it can just be. No one says on the playground, you throw like a girl anymore. They say you throw like a weak-armed person. And that doesn't roll off the tongue, so obviously that's not going to be what they say.
I'm a bigger fan of, oh damn, that hurts.
Yeah, you know, but it's just that the culture as a whole is what's really the problem, and the individuals need to step up and kind of own that, and
Okay.
right now nobody wants to.
Okay. Crystal?
I know you said you don't want to go to the past, but I think that we have to, because one thing that I get often being on Facebook and being easily accessible is pushback for one, my black characters don't die, and I'll make it to the end, and that two, that like most of my characters are women, like she was explaining the ratio, but every single story that I wrote has a woman in the center of the story, and she drives it. So just enjoy the story and don't write me to tell me, well, that's not what girls do. Are you kidding? I've been a girl for 43 years. Like, so I think just acceptance. If the story is good and the character is black or gay or white, it just let go of the old stereotypes and just embrace a new story. I think that's what I think would help a lot.
Okay.
I think the biggest problems that we run into, that we see running into, is the gatekeepers and preconceptions of genre. The gatekeepers have been predominantly, for the last 150, 200 years, the gatekeepers of mass media have been white cisgender dudes. And so they've been, this is where the preconceptions on genre come in. They've been writing stories about white boys, by white boys, for white boys, about white boys claiming white girls while beating up on people who might not necessarily be white boys. And it's that whole imperialist attitude that comes through, especially in the boys' stories, literally the boys' stories of England from the 1700s, 1800s, is built on this expectation of the conquering European male, who is almost invariably straight. We're going to be straight here. Almost invariably male, and almost invariably succeeds in heroic deeds by conquering other people. And because the gatekeepers have been functioning within that, by gatekeepers, I mean the publishers, the editors, art directors, producers, etc., they say this is what the genre is, which is where all the rest of these problems come in. They will not, and I say this from 25 years professionally in the business, being a cisgender whitish dude, will not even consider looking at alternatives. So I say, screw the gatekeepers, let's make our own damn gates, because we've got an excellent opportunity right now to do that.
All right, let's talk about that. Who would like to start, how we can start constructing those gates, both socially and systemically?
Well, I think touching on earlier how like people who are the indies are very accessible on Facebook, so it's easy to have a dialogue with your readers, and like sometimes it's hard though, because how can I explain this? But it works both ways. But like in the second book of the Spectrum trilogy, I got a lot of people who they live and breathe sword and sorcery. I'm more of a horror person, but I needed. That's where the story took it. I just followed the story, and like I got a lot of pushback because I have a white dragon who breathes fire, and apparently a white dragon is an ice dragon. So like, what? And I got so much pushback from that. I just know, but like the dragon is still white and it's still breathing fire. I apologize for that. But you know, I make it up as I go along. But now that the second series that I'm working on, I'm paying much more closer attention to details. Yeah, geek details. Like I just everyone was so mad about it. I was like, it's a dragon. It's not real. So I'm saying that. And then another thing that's interesting as far as like the gatekeepers is. People, I have, my worlds are very diverse, lots of different ethnicities, and a lot of people send me emails to contest the historical accuracy of a world that didn't exist until I told you it did. So, like, what am I supposed to do with that? Like,
Laugh.
So, and I think that's just because of what Cedros was explaining. It's the whole, what we grew up listening to, even though I do have a lot of diversity in my stories. I still get people of color writing me and saying, why is there so much reference to Euro magic? Well, that's what's there. I didn't have a math the Asian, I didn't have a C word, so I had to create one, because my culture, like being African American and Brazilian, it's been crushed by the people who conquered our world, so I had to make it up, and it was the only reference that I had to go on. So, and working on it, it's just it's a slow process. But but for the most part, I don't really answer a lot of emails because they come from such a defensive place to begin with. Like the whole dragon thing for 3 weeks, I was just like, what in the world did I just do? Like, really? Like,
Oh, honey, you can forward them to me and I'd be happy to answer.
I was just so
I've been putting down gamers for 16 years. I'd be happy to put them in their place for you.
So yeah, I just I think that being accessible to readers so that at least I could like know what's out there, and at the same time readers being acceptance to exploring new worlds, because I write what I see, and in my own personal world, there's mostly women, there's a handful of gay people, and everyone comes from different cultures. Me and my sister, we grew up on a military installation, so we didn't know that we had our own color camps until we left, when we still started going to school in public, and we were like, what is wrong with people? Like, really? So, I grew up from a different perspective, and so that's what I bring to the writing, and some with not that background. I get the emails, I get them all the time, I read them all, I don't answer them all because I don't want to start a fighting war, I don't want to have a flame war, I don't want to be like, this is their sex, because I don't. But you know what I mean? Like, the fans are like contentious, so I don't really want to like get into a trench war like that. But I do read all the emails and everything is taken into consideration.
So do you feel, I guess I guess everything else, you mentioned the frequency. So we have interaction, and do you feel that interaction, the direct interaction between the authors and of all genders, will be able to fix that frequency, issue that you brought up?
I don't know necessarily that it's always interaction with the authors that would do it. I mean, that would be one of the things, but I think it's interaction with different types of people in general that sort of opens people's minds to things. And I think one of the things that's a big issue is that without talking to many feminists, people don't know what feminism is, and thus have this strange idea that it's we all hate men and want to be better than them, which is clearly not the case, because feminism is supposed to help both genders. It's supposed to, make men not get bullied for crying in public, just as much as it's supposed to help little girls be able to, play baseball and not get sick, you feel like a girl or whatever. So I think not just interaction with authors, but just interaction with more feminists in all areas, people who actually understand the idea of gender equality and are able to explain it without, making people angry, is important. So going to panels like this, is good.
Yeah, you guys.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think if I can add something, what you guys have been saying is, and I totally agree with this, the best thing we can all do is we can support each other, not tear each other down. And we catch people tearing other people down, take them out. And I don't mean take them out as in kill them.
Well, he does.
Yeah. But don't stand by when you see somebody acting like a douchebag for whatever reason. Don't just stand there on the sidelines. If you see somebody giving someone a hard time for an unjustified reason, especially gender, ethnicity, creed, whatever, say something. And when you are enjoying your fantasy media, our fantasy media, when you're creating, when you're I would say consuming, but I guess that is the right word. Go outside your comfort zone. Go outside your comfort zone. Read things, see things that are outside what you usually see, maybe outside of your own experience. When you create, don't just create the stuff that you're familiar with. and don't just stick around in a small group of people bouncing your own thoughts and preconceptions off an echo chamber. We've got this amazing, diverse world. We have, for one of the first times in history, the social media to be able to actually interact with each other and put our own creations out there for everybody on a global scale. Enjoy that, use it, and support one another.
The thing about, I think, a downside for the social media is, like you said, we can talk to anyone in the world, but when you see people in groups, it seems like they just find the same people that they're comfortable with. And so, like, how did that happen when we were, I already told you how old I was, but like, I used to like go out and hang out with my friends and see different people and be exposed to like different experiences, but it seems like on the internet, it lets you stay inside a bubble. Like, it's the internet. Like, what? Like, how does that happen?
I think what we're touching upon is one of the great things about science fiction is that if you do come from a very limited personal perspective, or if your world experience just in real life is kind of limited, you're able to pretty much go anywhere you want to in an imagined space, and you can interact with all sorts of beings, whether they're human or not. And so I think, to return to the gatekeeper question, one of the strongest things that we can do, particularly with large publishers, is financially support projects that push boundaries. Because if those titles don't make it to a bound collection, or if they don't make it to like merchandising processes, then all of the characters that we care about go away. And no matter how many fan petitions we sign on Tumblr, they don't really ever come back. And so one of the early panels here this morning was like, we are a fandom, hear us roar. And I don't think we recognize enough inside of geek culture, whether we're feminist or we're people who are transgender, is that really it comes down to our purchasing power.
Yeah.
And if we don't support characters because the writers change or the artists change and characters we previously liked become less, that doesn't help them. If anything, it's a quicker way to make sure those characters disappear.
I also think as a writer, it is our responsibility to fly in the face of that which we do not like. When I wrote The Corsican, I had a very diverse cast, male, female, different gender, or different, different species, different everything. But what happened is I didn't even realize how diverse the cast was until my editor read it. And then he went, wow, I think we could really sell this on the strength of your female characters. I think that's our in, and I was like, what? Because I'm people.
Right.
My female characters weren't any stronger or less strong than my male characters. They each had their strengths and weaknesses. One of the strongest, like, physically characters in my entire book is a female, but she's also the most emotionally, like, she's very shy, and she's actually quite, she gets picked on and bullied. She's very strong, but there is a point in the book where she gets hideously bullied by two other girls who neither one are nearly as strong. But together, they form a pack, and they basically intimidate the hell out of her. And it's just who she is as a person. She's very sensitive. And so it takes her a very long time to learn that she's strong, and that it's not just the strength of her muscles, it's the strength of her character. But I didn't do that because I didn't make her a chick because, that was just that particular character. I had another character who was dyslexic, but he becomes the captain of the ship. And like, that was his character arc. They're all just people. And so I think that it's just important for writers to not write to expectation, because it's the surprise that makes people who read your stuff learn.
I almost want to take strong out of the descriptor.
Right.
I agree.
I feel strong is default. They're already strong.
Yes, I would agree.
Well,
So-
and when we talk about strong female characters, people have this like idea that a strong female character is a female character who carries a sword and like sasses a lot, which is a strong female character, but there's so many other ways for your female character to be strong.
And by, at least to me, by
Yeah.
saying the character is strong, that leaves it open for others to be, seems unique.
Yeah, that's the implication of a strong female character, is that other female characters who are not this person are weak.
Well, historically, it is a sign of progress because with very few exceptions, female characters were, and to a degree still are, but especially were in genre fiction, relegated to being the trophies at the feet of Conan or whomever. And so the idea of the strong female character, especially in the 70s and 80s, by way of Marion Zimmer Bradley, Mercedes Lackey, and so forth, did come forward and go, you know what, fuck this. Here's my gun, here's my sword. I'm not going to cringe in the corner anymore. Now that's become a stereotype, but I think the fact that it's a stereotype is a sign of progress. Now we go on to the next step of how about everybody be human.
Right.
Like, I didn't even, like, my idea to publish my first book of feminism was women marching and burning their bras. But when I started getting emails from girls and women, and they're so thankful about my characters, and they asked me like what my role was in the feminism movement, I was like, what? Like, I had no idea. Like she said, like, just write what I know, and I'm lucky enough to have a very diverse life history and experience, but it's just
It was shocking, wasn't
it
it?
was.
I was like, okay, I'm not a feminist. Nobody, until I was told I was one.
But like, and then I was super surprised at how many people, I was surprised and both heartbreaking. It was heartbreaking to, every time someone new reads my book, I always get an email expressing how happy they were that the cast is so diverse. Like this one woman, even though she's not going to read it to her son because he's too young, she was like, when I found out that Julie was gay, I just burst into tears. She's like, I've never ever read a gay character like this in a book, and he's just a jeweler. He's not doing anything. He's there with his partner, and they're in the jewelry store, and they're making people jewelry, and he gets this huge promotion, and I was just like, I can't be the first person who wrote a character like this. I just can't.
Well, I think it comes back to what Danielle was talking about earlier about ratio and representation. And particularly within minority cultures, like obviously, sometimes what is most visible and also most harmful to a mainstream audience is a stereotype. And so it's, as you guys have been saying, when you write your characters, like if you are writing a character that's been historically underrepresented, like you need to watch out for your warrior woman stereotype or your strong female warrior stereotype, or your effeminate gay or angry lesbian stereotype, because if you perpetuate those sorts of stories, because that's the culture you've been raised in, or not raised in, then that doesn't leave a place for a new audience to step in and transform that existing cultural space.
And the thing is, he wasn't stereotypical, he was a jeweler who just happened to be gay, and his partner was an artist in the Seattle Art Institute. I just explained them like how we see people here in Seattle, and she was just so blown away by that. It was really moving and kind of really sad. Like, where do you live? You don't have gay people. I don't understand.
I think there's a county somewhere.
Texas, there's a lot of that.
So,
Preach, sister.
so
Yes.
as speaking as an author myself, I've always felt the best way to do it is just write people first, and everything else will fill in on its own.
Yeah, I didn't know he was going to be gay until like 6 chapters in. Like, I didn't know. I just followed the story.
Right, yeah, that's how it works.
And that was one of the most moving letters I've ever had.
Well, this is something I was curious to ask about with fantasy writers and comic book artists on this panel, is how, at least, I know we're focusing on the future, in the past, in superhero comic books, before we had before we had minority characters represented in human form, very often we had like alien species that like started this sort of intercultural mixing or miscegenation or so on and so forth. And one of the questions I have for you guys is sort of like a paradoxical sci-fi question.
That's
like,
me. I can handle that.
Yeah, like, so if we take these moves forward in fantasy, at what point do we need to take it out of that realm and apply it to human characters or realistic space?
Well, I reverse it because most of my characters are based on people that I know in real life. And I think maybe that's why I'm getting, every time someone reads The Darkness, I know it's a new reader just by the heading. You know, I was like, this person is just now started this series. And I don't set out to look like I need 6 women, I need a gay guy, I don't do that.
That's a recipe for a book if you're taking it.
I just write the characters as with my own experience, and so it's backwards. And I think that's why, especially like a lot of from the LGBT community, I'm getting a lot of fans from those guys because it's not stereotypical. I don't think it's stereotypical. It's the people that I hang out with, and the people that I see, and the people who give me coffee, my own jeweler, you know. And so I don't unless I'm like gone in space, like in another story, they always come back. I had to go back and read, because in fantasy you still have to have a little bit of realism. I'm a mechanical engineer. I was classically trained as a mechanical engineer. So when you have a hot air balloon traveling warp speed in space, I'm going to have a problem with that because there's what about the fabric of the balloon? You know, but like when I'm doing technical stuff like that, I always go back to the foundations, you know. But as far as people is concerned, I write people as characters. I hope that answered your question.
I think the other thing that helps is that we have this new like subgenre now in fantasy that didn't exist before. We have urban fantasy now, and like I mean, obviously like Twilight is a big example of it, but like Harry Potter would probably be considered an urban fantasy too. Like there's a lot of that going on, and that's really popular now, and so that moves us, I think, one step closer from, you know, hobbits and elves into like wizards who also are part of the real world. And so like when you're dealing with J.K. Rowling and she has, you know, Lupin as a werewolf, the werewolf was supposed to be kind of a representation of how people with AIDS have to live, you know, that they're scared of infecting other people, or like with the mudbloods in Harry Potter where it's racism. And I think the urban fantasy genre, and I don't know if we have an urban sci-fi genre, we probably do, I don't know. But like that's moving us one step closer, I think.
And on that point, I know you guys are going to probably like close and discuss, but because it's urban-y and it's the Twilight series, the books weren't that bad, you guys. They weren't that bad, and they were like regular kids and people that we can connect with, and I think that goes to what you're saying about the urban fantasy part. I don't. It's not really urban because they're up in forks. It's a modern day.
It's modern day.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Well, that's and Chris, you're absolutely right, because one of the reason that the Twilight books have done so well is because people can relate with them, and we can sit there and go, oh, vampires aren't really like that, or why did you desecrate vampires that way? But the most personally, I mean, I'm not going to say this as a general rule, but for me personally, the most important thing that a work of art and or entertainment can do is connect with somebody on a personal level.
Yeah.
And the Twilight books and movies clearly did that. So there's plenty to diss in there, but she did an awful lot of things right.
I like sparkly. I have shiny ball syndrome, so anything that sparkles is good enough for me.
You can argue that the fact that people got so angry about it is also an aspect of that connection too.
Yeah.
Exactly. If people weren't emotionally connected to it, they wouldn't feel angry. They wouldn't feel anything. It would just be disposable.
Yeah.
Well, I'm gonna have to ask for final thoughts because I'd like to get to some of you to speak up and ask questions. You can do that?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, we have one.
Yes, okay. So final thoughts from everybody, and then we will get into answering questions.
Can we start final thoughts over there?
Yes. As we all turn to you.
But you're at the end of the line.
So, were you asking me what my final thoughts would
Final
be?
thoughts before we have to start taking questions.
Final thoughts, my final thoughts would be, go outside your comfort zone, create, dream, and support other people. Not just people that you seem to think that you could, not just the people that you think you see in the mirror. Support everybody who is doing good work. Support people, I'm repeating myself. Dream, create, support, learn, thrive.
That's a good.
That was a good one. That's a hard word.
Call that one.
I think my final thought is using Twilight as an example. If you don't like a certain work, don't slam it. Just support the ones that you do, because when you have to remember, the author's friends and families are just as affected by the negative input as the author is. So, like, can you imagine like what Stephanie's kids must feel when they were reading those horrible comments about the sparkly vampires? Like, if it's not your thing, then just support what you do like, instead of like slamming. That's my kind of
My final thought is that at the end of the day, no one likes to be judged. Personally, when we feel
Unless it's a good
judged,
review.
when it's us. I'm saying judged. I'm saying judged.
Okay.
No one likes it. And so think about that before you do it. And that's pretty much the way that the world kind of works. Or should work.
I'm sorry, I'm yet again going to have to push a little bit, because I think that one of my final thoughts, one of the things I hope to discuss more, if you have any questions about this, please do, is how can we use sci-fi and graphic novels to open up these discussions, not even just on the page, but in how we approach or consume sci-fi. Like, how do we take something for someone who might have Asperger's syndrome and write that character into a story so that it represents that perception just as importantly as someone who is neuronormal and whatnot.
You know, I'm actually going to say, you mentioned Asperger's syndrome. There's a story out there by an author named Jennifer Povey. She wrote a book called Transpecio. The protagonist is, in fact, high-functioning Asperger's. So if that's something that interests you, you can find it online by Melissa Books, as an example.
And to touch on her point, if you guys like horror movies, there's a movie called Burning Bright, where one of the main characters is an autistic kid. It is the most terrifying movie I've ever seen. Not because of the kid. I mean, a little bit because of the kid, because he's not afraid of anything. And I didn't want to give too much away, but they were locked in a house with a tiger. And so you've got this big sister who's trying to take care of her autistic brother, who isn't afraid of anything. So if you guys like horror movies, check out Burning Bright. And every time you rent that movie, part of that goes to one of the autistic foundations, but I can't remember which one. I always rent it. I never buy it.
Also a nice allusion to William Blake.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, and my final thought, that now that I've had time to think about it, people, one of the advice that people often give writers, or that writers give each other or hear a lot, is write what you know. Don't write what you know, because you wouldn't want to read what you know. You don't want to sit down and read a story about your life. You would be bored. You know about your life. What you want to read when you go to science fiction and fantasy is about some world that you don't know, characters that you've never met, characters who are different from you. And I think that there's probably a lot of people in here who are creating art and characters and films and all sorts of cool stuff, or will be in the future. And if you ever have a chance to create characters and worlds, don't do just what you know.
Unless you're black.
Stuff. I mean, obviously do stuff what you know because you want people to be able to connect with these characters, but don't limit yourself to just what you know. Find people who are different from you and represent them as well.
And learn about the stuff you don't know.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
It's
You
like
always open yourself to new
traveling through
experience.
space in a hot air balloon. Like that just takes you right out.
Okay, so I'm going to open the floor to questions. So the microphone is right there. So who would like to speak? Oh, here we go. Oh yeah, here we go.
It's a race to the microphone.
You guys, look at her shirt.
That's
Move
nice.
your badge so that we can see it.
I am actually Crystal's sister. I am Cynthia Connor. And my question goes to the authors and to all the beautiful cosplayers I see all around. There is a huge group that seems to be getting ignored. I am representing on my shirt and with my body. It's not just your feminists, it's not just your minority. What happened to the fat girls? Where are we? I'm not seeing my story. I'm not seeing this cosplaying that much because when plus size girls do it, they get slammed, they get made fun of. If we're gonna start supporting love and support equality, I really gotta throw out there that our stories need to be heard too. So with the whole, I get that you were saying, Ms. Myers, to not write about what you know, but I really think that our stories need to be heard because nobody is saying them. And we're the only group out here that still, it's okay to harass, to make fun of, to pick on, to physically assault, and no one's really doing anything about it.
Right on.
Cynthia, I fully agree with you, and I will also say this, you're very eloquent. You should write your own story too.
Yeah.
I am. It's coming. I promise you that with the next release. It's
Okay.
all about you.
Who's next? Okay, who's next?
Hi, I wanted to ask about, I guess bring up the role of fan fiction and fan communities, where I see a lot of reading queerness or reading
So glad you brought this up.
neurotypical aspects into characters that may not have been written that way originally, and writing new stories for female characters or less featured characters that were kind of hidden in the background.
This is,
I was just saying, I would be flattered if someone wrote fan fiction about my book because that means that someone read it.
I had a friend who, as she was reading the book the first time, was writing on Tumblr about it and said something about this new ship. I'm going to ship the two girl characters together, and I was like, I didn't even think about them ending up together, but I'm happy about this, like this idea. So I was thrilled.
one of the things that I think is so unbelievably fascinating about fandom culture, and particularly I mentioned Tumblr before. I'm all over Tumblr. I follow these ships, right? And I will go down with them, as the joke says. But what's so cool about it, and particularly when you think about the younger communities who are using the internet to access information about their identities and about connecting with people who have different viewpoints from all over the world, is that when you really connect with a character inside of a novel or a series, that character kind of becomes an extension of you in a way. And so, we'll just go back to Harry Potter, right? So, if you are a Draco-Harry shipper, then that's an interesting expression of two different desires that you have as a reader. And I think it's a really interesting and healthy way for people to experiment with their sexuality or learn about sexuality without necessarily having to go out and do it themselves. I don't know. That's my 2 cents on the ships.
It doesn't, and it doesn't necessarily have to just stay in fan fiction. Gay editor Steve Berman just came out with an anthology called Where Thy Darkest Eye Glances, which is a queer take on Edgar Allan Poe stories. I've got a story in there where we did Hop Frog, but instead of having the little ballerina, it's a Hop Frog and Guy. But you can draw from this phenomenal wealth of mythology that we have that is, for all intents and purposes, public domain, and do books, films, etc., that do different takes, alternative takes on those. It doesn't have to just stay as fan fiction.
And if you really want to support that kind of thing right there, Circle Press
Yes.
does a lot of erotica. Your brother-in-law actually that works a lot with that. They do all kinds of fantastic short collections on that same line. So check that out. Circlet Press. They'll do Scheherazade's Facade, things like that. Which, by the way, take mammoth amounts of work to get anybody interested in it. And it can be really, if it's out there, support it, please.
Support your artists.
Support your artists, support what they believe in too.
And the publishers.
And also with the publishers. You?
All right. I'm an educator.
I'm sorry?
I'm an educator.
Teacher
Hi,
represent.
thank you.
I teach a subset of kids with learning disabilities. So that's not what my question's about. But I
Thank
find
you
it very
nonetheless.
interesting that you're bringing all that up. What's been coming up a lot lately for me, and it's not necessarily in the realm of books and publishing and things of that nature, but it really hit a connection tonight. Was like I just saw the interview with Malala, the girl who got attacked, and the thing that I thought that was interesting with her was she was like, instead of hitting violence with violence, I was just going to explain to them what was going on. I was going to explain to them what was happening to me. And so the reason that what I'm thinking about with you guys is like it's really you have such a good opportunity, but at the same time a big obstacle with educating other people. Like we're all here, but we all have a vested interest here and stuff. So that's why we're here. So it's almost like, in some respects, you could be preaching to the choir. But so how do you get it out there? Like how do you educate those who might be resistant to being educated? Such as I'm from Tennessee. There are lots of counties that don't have diverse populations.
I'm from West Virginia.
But that's kind of what how do we educate or spread the word, or how do you open those doors? How do you open the editors? How do you open that kind of publishing?
Speaking of her, the way to open the door would be to focus on her father, because I've been following the story ever since it happened, and he is the embodiment of feminism. He knew that if his daughter was going to go to school, that she could get injured, and yet he let her go to school anyway. So we need to start with people like that, like what drove him to allow her to risk her life to go to school, even after the threats happened, after his house was shot up, after she was the assassination attack. Like, you start with him, like what was it about him? He's raising a daughter in the heart of the Taliban country. Like, if he can be that strong, like what's stopping us? We're in the United States of America. Like, we have the best education system at the tip of our fingers, and we piss it away. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
I know exactly.
I mean, so like look to him for inspiration, because every time I see another Malala story, I just think about how strong and scared and how brave her father must have been. Because he knew. Other daughters at home too, and he'd support her 110%.
And I'm going to jump into, as a fellow educator, I teach writing, English generally. Yay! And one of yay, cool. But one of the things that I have found to be really useful is when I'm talking to them about, part of English is you read a short story and you analyze a character, an important scene, right? I think that's everyone's 10th grade essay in a nutshell. But I've started speaking to them in terms of rhetoric, and to think about there are so many great blogs for this, like the Hawkeye Initiative, where guys Yeah, you guys know this. We're all here now. I love comic book conventions. Because I try to explain that to my students, and I put pictures on the screen, and they're like, "What do you do in your free time?" But I think really, like superheroes are really great for illustrating gender divides, cultural divides, racial divides, because you put up a picture of Wonder Woman, and then you put up a picture of Batman in Wonder Woman's costume, and you don't even have to explain it. They get it, right? They know something's up. And sometimes it's just very simple tricks like that. Be like, okay, write me 2 pages explaining the difference of how you would react to the superhero, and bam, gender stereotype busted.
Fantastic. Thank you. Yes?
Actually, we are short on time with our other.
So we're short on time? Okay, so I'm going to tell you what.
Can we field her last question? And
Yes, we're going to field our question, and then, I don't know about you guys, but I would be happy to stand outside and chat with whoever wants to come up outside.
Yeah. That would
I'm also I'm gonna be at the signing table immediately
Support
after
your
this.
artist.
Oh!
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
come talk to me at the signing table
Okay.
as soon as you leave my room.
Please. Having a hard time hearing you, Liz.
Oh, sorry, the gentleman on the end mentioned gatekeepers, and I'm wondering, can gatekeeping fundamentally, the definition of gatekeeping fundamentally change with the internet and with small publishing companies that focus
Kickstarter.
on, what kind of role can they play, and how can small organizations like that get on board to the kind of communities they want to feel, they want to make feel inclusive?
Social networking to begin with, making community, building community, funding community, networking. It's just conventions themselves. And Crystal and I met at a convention, 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago? Good God, it's 3 years. but at conventions, hanging out with people, talking with people, going to panels and so forth, but building up those connections, making friends with people on Facebook that are based around shared interests, and then using, like I said, like you said actually, sorry, but things like Kickstarter, crowdfunding, learning how to produce quality books, quality writing, quality films. Look at, for instance, Zombie Orpheus Entertainment here in Seattle, which actually I believe is having a screening tonight. I recommend that folks go to that one. But taking the resources that you have, because everybody who's in this room has access to an unprecedented level of resources, creative and distribution resources. Didn't even exist 10 years ago, much less 15 or 20 years ago. We can all use those things to transform the landscape by making ourselves the gatekeepers. We could do like a whole panel on how you do that. I'd be glad to talk about that after the panel because my partner and I do it. But we all have the opportunity. Everyone in this room, everyone in this convention has the opportunity to reshape those things and change the gates.
And more to the point, we all have a story.
Yes.
And we now have the opportunity to let that story free.
Exactly, because you don't have to sell to the prejudiced editor who only buys 5 books a year and won't buy. Well, we can go into that later.
Well,
but in any case,
I'm
yeah,
gonna have to stop, and I'm just going to say thank you again.
Thank you guys so much.
Very
for coming.